This might not be your typical encounter, but it chilled me to the core nonetheless. It's actually the main reason I no longer work in the industry, though I tell people that it's the hours that made me quit. This happened when I was doing nightclub security in the UK. I was just chilling at the front door when I see a fight happening with a guy chasing another one down across the street, and I'm like, oh well, it happens. 99% of the time they just shout a little bit and try to intimidate one another and go get a kebab and puke. Mainly, they just try to make the other person think they're gonna fight. Think peacocks shaking feathers at one another, that kind of thing. This time, however, the guys got into a tussle against a parked car, and pretty quickly the chased guy was down for the count and passed out after some hefty blows. At this point, I need to intervene. It has literally been seconds since the start of the fight, but they are across a very busy one-way street, so I try to stop the car so I can get there on time. It feels like hours, but I finally get in between them. The aggressor is kicking the other guy's head in over and over, full force as he lies on the ground. I realize that this guy might die, which is why I got into the middle of it. I get in between them and shout at the aggressor to stop. Luckily, guys don't often want to fight girls, but I am ready to defend myself in any case. He looks like he's going to start kicking me too, and I brace myself to block any strikes. He simply grins and books it up the road instead, and I can focus on the guy on the ground. I try to give him first aid. Stop the bleeding. His face is basically just a hole at this point, so it's pretty hard to stop this bleeding, and the back of his head is gone too. I know the piece of advice: if you need someone in a gathering to phone an ambulance, you need to choose a person and give them direct orders, not just ask in general. So I ask, or it's more really a bark of an order, the only guy around I see with a phone, to call 999. However, his eyes are blank and he holds his phone still. It's like in a nightmare when you yell to draw attention to something but no one can hear you. I tell him again. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. I start shouting, raising my voice. He needs to call an ambulance. This guy is dying. He needs help. I realize, by the way this guy was moving around, that he's filming us. He's probably trying to get a good shot of the guy's face as he lays dying in front of me. I feel like I'm in Black Mirror. Eventually, someone else phoned, and I haven't seen any YouTube clips from that area or date. Though I have looked for it. He might have taken it down. Maybe my incessant shouting at him and asking what the hell is wrong with him might have deprived him of some likes or something. I don't know what happened to any of the parties involved. I'm going to court soon for the assault/attempted murder, but I'm not sure what the charge is. I'm pretty sure the injured guy made it. I never saw anything about it in the news, which is a good indicator. He might not have been so lucky, though. I am sure he stopped breathing just before the help arrived. I just pray that if something happens to me or someone I care about, bystanders will call for help instead of trying to capture that suffering on film. It all started on St. Patrick's Day in a small town, when I met a lanky guy that seemed like fun company. The sun was setting, and he said he had some fireworks he could show off, and having never seen fireworks up close, I agreed. Me, him, and a mutual friend walked to his house, and the fireworks were disappointing, but at least they weren't dangerous. On the way back to town, he started flirting. Now, he was tall. In fact, very tall compared to me. I'd say he was definitely over 6 feet, and I'm about 5'3". I thought he was kind of cute, so I flirted back. He decided to say, "I almost want to make a move, but I don't want to scare you." I said, "Go ahead," and then he grabbed me. He licked my neck and grabbed my crotch through my jeans. I was shocked. No one had seen this happen except for the three of us in a dark alley at around 8 p.m. Somehow, I forgave him. I thought he was just, I don't know, bad at these kind of things. Or maybe he was drunk or tired or something. I remained friends with him. He was one of the only friends I had, after all. It was now summer, and I was bored. so I went to his house alone, without even telling my parents, because I figured they'd just worry for no reason. Well, in retrospect, they would have had a reason. But anyways, his house looked dusty and old, like peeling paint and a blanket of dust in some of the rooms, and something just didn't feel right at all about it. I heard a dog, and it sounded big, but it was in the yard. When I went into his bedroom, he closed the door, and there were holes in it. All over it, in fact. Holes and slices. He told me that when he's mad, he stabs his door. I was between him and the door. I remember looking past him and seeing a fish tank, before hearing something, and flinching. He had thrown a knife into the door. It was impaled into the side of the wood next to me, and now he was laughing because I flinched. "I knew that would scare you," was what he said. I looked back at the fish tank. It was loud. He opened the door. He told me something that still haunts me. He looked me right in the eyes, so close, and at least a foot taller. Oddly, I remember his nose more than his eyes, how close it was to me. In a tone somewhere between small talk and the kind of sound you would make when you were complimenting somebody's looks, he said,
"You know, I could kill you so easily right now."
Struggling to keep the fear out of my voice, after a forced laugh, I said that I'd rather sit outside together, rather than inside with all the dust. I then told him I was gonna go get us some ice creams, because apparently he was not allowed to leave his house after his last suicide threat. I tried to keep steady as I walked in the general direction of the carvel. I made sure I was out of his sight. I called my mom and asked to be picked up. I told her I wanted to be picked up because I was bored. She said she could get me in an hour, and I decided to spend that hour on the other side of town, in the library. When she arrived, she said that I looked sick. I told her that it was just the heat, and she believed me. Last summer of 2005 was the worst days of my life. I was a 10-year-old boy that lived in Araby, Louisiana, in the St. Bernard Parish. This is all a part of the New Orleans metropolitan area. I lived in a beautiful blue double shotgun house with my mother, father, and younger sister, Angel. Around August 26, there was news of a big storm coming, and I remember my mom talking on the phone with a friend and making plans to go out of town, but that plan never followed through. That day, my father had made his mind to just stay behind because he had rode out many hurricanes in the past, and this storm wasn't very different. That storm was named Katrina. We had bought sandbags and planks and spent the whole day boarding up the house. School was closed for that week, so I was excited for the storm, plus I had loved the rain, so I was expecting nothing much other than some rain and cartoons. The hurricane was talked down so much that everyone thought it was going to be nothing at all. The best case scenario was that it was all talk, and I think this talk led to some to stay behind and die. I don't remember that much of the daytime of August 29th, but I remember the sound of the wind. It sounded like loud whispers. These whispers smashed into the planks that protected us from the outside. My whole family bundled together on my parents' bed, praying to God and listening to radio because the power shut off, destroying my cartoon plans. I recall the radio announcer saying that this was Big Eno. That night, I didn't sleep. The rain was so fucking loud and the tensions were too high. My mother and Angel were crying in the room, and my father sat in the kitchen, looking into space with his hands rested on his head. I decided to go to my own room, and I looked through the wooden boards that covered the wind. It was dark, and I could see the water surge. My street looked like a river. I looked out for a minute or two and saw a wheelchair being thrown through water like a rag doll, and I wondered whose chair that was and where they were. I started to cry because I was watching the environment I grew around in this state of disrepair. I wasn't as religious as my parents, but I hadn't prayed this hard in my life to crucify Jesus that was nailed above my bed. It was around 11 p.m. when I heard whistles. Whistles that were different from the wind. The whistles of a song, and continued for a few minutes. I was too scared to look out the planks. I didn't really pay attention to these, but I would later learn what the source was. 2 days passed, and we waited on the rooftops with our neighbor, Miss Doopy, where we learned her elderly mother had died after her oxygen machine failed, and her body was still in their house. On those roofs is where I actually thought I would die. It was around 100 degrees and we had little water. Sometime during the day, my father took a piss off the side roof where he fell back with shock when he saw the scene on the side of the house. On the side of the house was a dead, presumably old and homeless, skinny black man that had a cap that flopped over his head. His body was mangled with the fence while face down in the dark, murky water. We were told to avoid looking at that body. After this, I remember very little. We got picked up to go to the convention center and got located to Texas many days later. The man that was mangled in the fence was the one I had heard whistling since he was located parallel from my bedroom window. I'm not sure why he was whistling. Maybe he knew he was going to die and he sung one last song as he hung onto the fence until the elements got to him and he drowned. Or maybe he was whistling for help. A help that I probably could have done something about since I was the only one who heard him. Nearly 12 years since the big Eno, and I still think about the Hurricane Man. My family moved from Louisiana to Maryland with family, and I haven't been back to the States since. I just hope the family of that man found him, and I hope he was loved. We saw a figure just to the left of the building. Then we saw another person on the other side of the building. They were hidden in the shadows, but we could tell they were staring at us. That's when we decided it was best to leave.